Hi.
Hey.
Hello.
Great.
Hello, Sandy. Hello, Tammy. Hello, Paul.
Hi.
Sorry, it's 2 minutes late.
So I don't think that Vivian and Tammy was meeting met before, and so Tammy, Vivian, she's my wife, and she has been in my journey for 20 years. So and we look for another 40, 50 years together in the new journey. So
Right.
unless you get tired of me.
You make a great team.
Thank you, Tammy.
Thank you,
Yes.
thank you. And we love the two of you, and we saw the two of you interact in on LinkedIn a few weeks back, right? So I say, why don't we bring the two of you, the amazing people, together, and then let's have another talk. And this time we talk to something that's very specific. And so Vivian and I, Vivian can share why we asked for, why we want to talk about the topic. Can you do that, Vivian?
Yeah. Hi, Tammy and Sandy. So we went through a lot of the insight sharing together and listening to all the global experts about the issues, the challenges, and the development. So we boiled out a few things, and the first thing that we came up is trust. So the trust is kind of like changing a lot of situations from personal life to professional life, and especially for corporate and for career path. So we thought maybe that's something that's going to be pops up very critical for us since we are getting back to the workforce now. A lot of great resignations, a lot of things going on in the market, and this issue will be magnified even more when we see people are jumping around. Is that something that we need to help? And with your expert and experiences, there's going to be some insight for us for our communities to hear a few things and to reflect and to learn from those of your opinions that you have to pretty much better for the next day. Yeah. So I think that's the purpose that Ha is asking our expert here, Tammy, Sandy, to join our conversations and to hear more about your opinions and what would you suggest and what thing we can learn and to do and apply every day. Yeah.
And on top of that, Tammy and Sandy, I think for a very long time we're trying to look out for something sophisticated, to help ourselves to grow, help our code, our organization to train people, make something, and make a big thing. But indeed, the more that we see, the later trend is everything is back to the very basic, right? How we love another, how we're gonna share love, build love, how we're gonna build trust and share trust, how we're gonna create a culture of engagement and connections. And instead of looking for advanced technology, it could be helpful somewhere, somewhat, but let's go back to the basics of everything. And so Viv and I are in the quest to rebuild that, so that if we can create a culture of loving, of sharing, of trusting, and I think that the relationship that we can build at home, outside of home, will be a lot meaningful and can contribute a lot to the future, where we want to build a better future, put it that way. So Tammy is an expert in that area. Sandy, you're also an expert, and you've been living in the world, also were male dominated, and so it's different kind of world. We want to bring that, real life experience of how trust is generated, built, and sustained over the years like that. And so anyone listen to conversation that we're sharing today, that we're able to pick things that they can learn and reflect and apply in their lives and review everything. All right. Sounds good to you?
Oh, I love the context in which you set that all, both of you. There's so many directions to go in, but I think you chose two good people together to speak to that, because we each, I think, offer somewhat different perspectives, and yet probably are very aligned in many ways as well. So, and it's interesting, I actually was just doing a lot of reading about this last night, because I'm working with a group of women executives who are dealing with these issues in their workplaces. They've got people who don't want to come back to the office. You know, we're talking about the Great Resignation. We're talking about people who have become accustomed to different practices of either working from home or having a lot more flexibility in their workday. And now they're being asked to do things differently. So anytime you ask people to make a change, it can shake up trust. And that's happening right now quite a bit. And people are pushing back against that. They're pushing back against leadership and authority. I would imagine it might be happening a little differently in different types of organizational structures. And I would imagine Sandy can speak to some of that as well. But I bet it's happening all over the world.
Yep.
Certainly not just in the US. And so it's also from the leadership perspective, from what I'm hearing, is shaking people's trust in their employees and not trusting that they're going to really be full team members. So there's a lot of people making assumptions about how things are going to be or how things have been in the last couple of years. And it's new territory for everyone in many, many ways. And nobody really knows how to navigate from here in some respects, particularly with these arrangements around hybrid office arrangements and things like that. And I think it's shaking people's trust in one another. The other thing that I see is changing people's perspective, and it also seems to be making people feel like they're not on as steady ground, which shakes trust as well, is we have many more generations in the workplace than we've ever had before.
Absolutely.
So, Noiha, you were just saying how, you plan to be with Vivian for another 50 years. Well, there are a lot of people who plan to be in the workforce for a much longer period of time, too. And we have many generations in the workforce, and there are a lot of different attitudes and working styles and expectations around what people expect from work, what they expect of leadership, and how they're engaging with leadership. It's shifting and changing, and that also shifts the way people trust or have expectations of one another. So definitely I'm hearing a lot of that from a lot of executives and leaders that I'm working with right now.
How about you, Sandy? Can you share your point of view on that?
Absolutely. The same situation, I think, is worldwide now. I'll speak for what I'm familiar with, but working with, talking with different companies and organizations, you see exactly what Tammy said. The trust is not just to try to give context to the word trust. It's not just a word. It applies to different people at all levels, and all stages and ages in an organization. And especially, I think that the biggest challenges, we had a norm for generations of what's expected in a workplace. And when employers made accommodations to help employees to navigate the COVID challenges, those employees were all too happy to take those opportunities and have a new lifestyle that satisfied some of them to a large degree. Who wouldn't want to work from home if they didn't have to get out of their pajamas every day? And so I don't see the same necessarily respect and trust going up to the employer. It's all about the employee and me. It's becoming, I think, a very self-centered, self-aggrandizing, self-promotional attitude that we're seeing, at least in our country, where people are demanding and they're not willing to give to serve a higher purpose anymore, to serve a mission, to abide by core values, to respect culture, to respect the civil society structure, the governance of their company. And right now they've got the opportunity to leave, but my thought is that's not going to last long. So the pendulum is swinging, and you can see this in some of the blogs I've written, where the pendulum has gone about as far as it can go with people getting paid for doing whatever they might be doing at home. Some of them are working more, some of them are working a lot less, and there's data that's starting to come out and show that. If you look at some of the research done, and employers are tracking their people more and more through technology, IT on their devices, and they can see who's doing what. And I think it's going to settle out as people realize that you can't replace being in person, and you can't do everything from home, and there's going to have to be some level of coming back, and that's all going to involve building trust and earning respect. And I have a theory of trust and respect that they're kind of coupled, two sides of the same coin. In fact, part of my leadership philosophy is an element called build trust and earn respect. And the building trust I see more as building trust between people and an organization. And then the earning respect I see as more people to people and people peer to peer, supervisor to subordinate. So that deep-seated respect of each other, of your boss, of what they're asking you to do. I think that the trust and respect go hand in hand as two sides of the same coin. I don't think they can be uncoupled. And I think that's one of the problems with trying to look at things with just one word or one phrase. So it's a great thing to have a discussion on this word trust, because there's thousands of books been written on trust. I mean, The Speed of Trust is one of the ones that comes right to mind. They're very useful, instructive books on trust. But the conversation, I think, can be richer if we look at the broader context. And I thank Tammy for setting the stage on that to open the context.
So if we start with the very basic of that, because I think that if we want to escalate into the bigger picture, let's understand the groundworks for this. We have different definition of trust, right? So unified trust is different than my definition of trust. And so let's start by understanding what is that, Sandy, in your vocabulary, in your life. How do you define trust? What is that?
That's a really good question, huh? No one's ever asked me that so directly. How would I define trust? So I think that trust, a really good question. The definition of trust, when I think of what trust is to me, I think that trust is built. So I think it's an active word, not necessarily a noun. I know it is. I know trust is a noun, but trusting. I like the active part of trust. So maybe the first way to look at it is to look at the verb trust and the noun trust. And I like the verb because I think that trust requires an active engagement of performing respectful communications and engagements between people. So that's what I would say is trust is an active word that requires complete engagement. It can't just be one way. So an employer isn't really going to be able to build trust with his or her employees unless there's some willingness to be reciprocity for the employees to also look up and be willing and receptive to trusting. So I think that's where you get this divided society that we see here in the United States. It's not united, it's divided, and that's because of a lack of this trust, because people aren't working together actively to build trust between each other. They're looking to divide instead of unify. So they're trying to, instead of seeking to respectfully understand other people, they're trying to just undermine other people in the workplace, on the social media, in politics, everywhere. So I would say trust is an active word that requires mutual engagement, respectful engagement and communication between all parties.
Wow. Beautiful answer. How about you, Tammy?
Oh my goodness. I was just sitting here thinking, I'm so glad you asked Sandy that question. You know, I actually just started taking notes on everything Sandy was just saying because I thought her answer was brilliant.
Yeah.
And I was agreeing with everything that she said because I don't know that I can that I think I can add to her definition because I agree with everything that she said in terms of that I think trust is it's not stagnant. It has to be active. It has to involve engagement. And there was another, I think the other, to take it a little further, and this might tie into more the dynamics around where leaders have to step in as well, and that is where, but it's also with people who report to those leaders, there's accountability, and that's part of the respect piece. So I think without respect, it's hard to even have the dynamic of trust, right? So being in a relationship where there's trust, you can have disagreement. You can have people who say to you, I don't want to come back to the office. There's trust in that. There's trust when people agree to disagree. So I think that there's got to be, we can bring in the word honesty too. If people are being honest with one another about where they stand, it's the same thing when you start having lots of systems put in place where employers are monitoring what somebody's doing on their computer every single moment. That's not trust.
It's not.
That's watching somebody every moment. That's not going to build trust. Don't get me wrong. There are times where that's necessary because you need to know what people are doing for a whole lot of reasons, but it doesn't build trust. And so there's got to be some ways where those dialogues happen. The other key is to help people learn how to listen. And I think there were ways in which during the height, let's say, of COVID, because we're still in it in many ways, where people, I think, did have to stop and listen more. But we really need to teach people how to do active listening. That means listening without judgment and listening to understand. Sandy just mentioned that as well. Seeking to understand, not just sitting there quietly while someone else talks. So it's really important to listen, to understand where somebody else is coming from, what their perspective is, and to be able to find some middle ground. There's nothing more important than that at this point.
And in the world that a lot of noise, listening actually seems to be challenged to a lot of people, right? We all want, a lot of us want to have our voice heard, and in the vulnerability of human beings, if we cannot get our voice heard, we seems to be like even feel more vulnerable and a lot less trusting on the system and the trusting on the people too. Vivian, I never asked you that question. I'm going to ask you the same. What's your definition of trust?
Yeah. So for me, I also agree with Sandy and Tammy for definitions. For the part that I'm feeling before I learned from your side that trust can be negative and positive. It's pretty much is someone doing something consistently the same way that they do every day. You trust that they are this good, or you trust that they are not that good. So the trust system to me seems to be a bit of authenticity. If they're able to show their original personality, they keep consistently doing the stuff that what they're representing for, then eventually I will build some connections, that I trust them in a positive way, or I also trust them in a negative way, that they're not able to do the stuff that I was looking at. So to me, that's a lot of things that may happen if I don't have any experience with them. I may not understand them more. So listening is very, very critical point to hear the people's side and to listen to what they have been doing consistently. So the observations also another part that I will put in for my definition of trust. So trust negative, trust positive.
I love it. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
But for me, Sandy and Tammy, when we was younger, seems to be nothing really impact to the trust level. We can trust everyone that we are, like small kid, we're teaching them, oh, don't trust to stranger. We kind of give them the separations in terms of judgment. These are the stuff that you should have trust, and these are should not trusting it. And eventually that system building up in a child, that it can be a very fine line between, judgment and prejudice. So I don't know, in your opinion, when we are in a small age, how we think about trust. When you was young, how you think of trust different than what you're thinking now. Yeah, Sandy, would you please share a bit how you was young and your definition of trust when you was younger?
I love the way that you mention, Vivian, that your childhood experiences can shape you, and they sort of shape you for the rest of your life, and for better or worse. Like you were saying, you've got this great way of looking at things from both sides, and there is always a outcomes associated with the input that is given to us. And oftentimes people don't think through that whole process of when you're teaching somebody what the unintended consequences might be of always telling a child they need to worry. So in our country, we have gone away from allowing children to, for instance, we've gone away from trusting our children outside to let kids run around the neighborhood, play with their friends, come back at dinner time, a couple hours on your bicycles, and you have to learn to navigate, so to speak, the obstacles that you find. You might have a little argument with another child while you're playing, and you resolve those conflicts, and the parents trust you, and you know that. Well, for the past generation in our country, our parents haven't let kids out to play. They haven't trusted their children or the society they live in, so they have kept their children close in. So now we've raised a generation of children who are more fragile, who don't have that same level of trust as adults, as college students. They look around the classroom and they don't feel safe. This whole psychological safety thing, I think, comes from this lack of trust they've been programmed to have as children, and it follows them up to where now they don't feel secure and safe in a classroom where there's really no harm to be had aside from your fragile mental state that you've never had the chance to build up and be strong because of the lack of trust that your parents showed in you and in the society out there. So now we have a whole generation of younger people with challenges, that mental health issues, because they can't cope, because they never learn to trust, have a basic foundational level of trust in the world they live in, with some understandings that you have to be careful of where you go and what you do and who you trust on the street that you don't know, or an email that comes into your inbox from some source you don't know. You don't want to click that link. So you can educate people smartly with how to trust and how not to trust in tactical ways, but strategically at the bigger picture, you need to build trust in young people at the early childhood level so that they can go out and be productive members of society and not be people who have mental health issues and can't cope with day-to-day living. And that's what we're seeing right now is a generation of young people who can't cope. And you were onto something, Vivian. I think it's because of the way they were groomed as children not to trust.
How about Tammy? What's your opinion about that?
Well, I think that I think there's been a lot of fear. It's sort of a fear-based approach that many of us, just raised our children. I'm probably one of them. Although I would say that there's a distinction between trusting yourself and trusting the outside world. And how do you bring somebody up to build that inner confidence and know how do you navigate the world in a way where you trust yourself and how you will engage with whatever you come across. But how, as a child, do you understand what do you trust out there? Like Sandy said, when we were kids, we just ran out the door and went and played with our friends. We trusted we would find our friends, and we were told to beware of strangers. So there was a little bit of that fear put into us, but not to the extent that we couldn't feel free to go out and enjoy our life. Then in other generations, it's been more of a fear-based approach, but a protective approach to the point where I think that we don't have a foundation in place that we've given to feel that confidence or self-knowledge of how do we navigate various circumstances so that we trust our own ability to navigate. This is something I work with my clients all the time when they're looking for that perfect situation, that perfect job, that perfect situation at work. And I say to them all the time, the first thing you need to do is trust yourself that you will find your way. It may not be perfect. So I think that self-knowledge is foundational when it comes to trust. And if you don't trust yourself that you'll be able to navigate whatever situations you come across, it's hard then to engage and expect others to trust you too.
Wow.
I really like that, Tammy. It goes back to my leadership philosophy that I put out when I became a more senior executive in the Coast Guard, and it had 3 pieces: build trust and earn respect, that we've been talking about. But just kind of to go what you said, my second element is believe in yourself and others. So that kind of goes to the trusting yourself. But if you can believe in yourself, trust yourself, be yourself, this might be another way of getting at this term that's in vogue now, authenticity. I think there's some challenges with the word authenticity, but believe in yourself and others. And then the third element is demonstrate moral courage. So the courage to do the right thing, which kind of goes back to you have to believe in yourself to be able to do the right thing. And you have to have trust in the system and have respect for other people, I think. So that's my leadership philosophy, but it kind of the center of my leadership philosophy probably is this whole element of trust. So I really, once again, thank you, Vivian and Ha, for bringing this topic to us, because exploring it from childhood to, the workplace, I think this all gets to some of unraveling the mystery of why we're having these challenges in the world with work right now, post-COVID. There's just a breakdown in trust.
Yeah, I want to just back up what Sandy just said, because it makes me think about, when I talk about work from the inside out, it's foundational. It starts from within. And if you don't have that from within, it's hard to then carry that out. But a lot of people started, and a lot of us did from childhood. We take in whatever we've been told, whatever the people that we trusted raising us or who were influential, we take those messages in, and those get ingrained. It's very hard to shake those. Those can run us. So unless we really build up a foundation and then learn otherwise, it's hard. Those kind of carry us through our lives.
I recently talked to a gentleman, and he shared a very, very 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 big things that that make me think a lot, and that's about the vocabulary that we have in our lives, right? We have so let's say there's a lot of, there's a lot of words demonstrate about emotions, then very small portion of the words actually in the positive side, a very big chunk of that actually demonstrate the in the negative sides of the emotions. And then when we absorb those emotions and things like that into our and our body, we build the foundation of our thinking, our belief and stuff like that. And because of that coming from the inside out, he said that basically we're gonna keep the space between us and the people long before we can let the people getting in, and that minimize the chance for us to build trust. They minimize the chance for us to have a fruitful collaborations, a good relationship and stuff like that. And and if we can eradicate all of the dictionary of words and then rebuild things in the better way, and have a far more fair chunk between the positive and negative emotions, perhaps trust can be built a lot faster. Do you think that's so, Tammy?
Yeah, I think so. You know, and yet I think there are incremental, things that have to happen over time. It depends also on, as you grow up and you become more independent, you have different experiences as you go along. And so there are things that intervene along the way. So it as we were talking about before, the whole dynamic of change being the only constant, there are certain things that intervene along the way that might impact that dynamic. But yes, it definitely is a process that can happen. I think, and I think that when you think about building trust, it's not so much about, in my mind, it's not so much about trying to do it quickly or fast, as much as we say the word building. I think you want it to stay. So I think about a gradual process of bringing it to light. And unfortunately, what I have also seen is how quickly it can get broken.
Yep.
It takes a long time to build, and yet it can be broken in an instant. And that's probably why it's so important. That's probably why we're talking about it, because it really is so vitally important.
Well, I like your question about the words that we use, and it goes back to more than just the words, but in our language we call it the narrative, or the story that's being told. So if you look at the media, at politics, at education, it's all a negative narrative or story of how bad America is, how bad our society is, how bad. And there's people who gain from that. If they can be disruptive and divide, there's people who operate better in that chaotic environment where there isn't any trust, because they can then kind of tear everything down and try to rebuild it the way they want to. So I think that's another thing you see is people are using the words, the negative words, to get people upset and distraught so that they can find a weakness there. So there's this terrible conflict and contest between the good words and the bad words, and those who want to build up with positive experiences and positive narratives. And if you look at the news, that doesn't sell as well as the negative. The stories about the good outcomes are rare, but the front page headlines about something bad happening and bad words and bad things, it seems to be what sells.
Yep.
So I think it's really important as a leader and as a follower, people in society, people in business and the workplace, understanding that we need to be using positive words, positive thoughts, positive narratives and stories about our lives and our work.
Mm.
Because if everyone's talking bad about the workplace, who would want to come back to the office if the negative chatter has gotten so loud that it dominates the whole conversation? So yeah, real good leaders of character, I would say, find a way to use a positive narrative to inspire people, to motivate people to build that trust.
With
So
that
to
being
Sandy, come to the curious questions that why people so easily got led by negativities. I mean, like, even though we can share a lot, and I think from company to company, they also try hard, but seem like, bad news spread faster, gossip go faster than the rest of those. Is that in terms of, person to person, or like the, upbringing time? Is that the survival skill set for human when to avoid something? So that's why negative can run faster than positivities. Yeah.
It's easy to complain. I'll speak from personal experience. I find I have to watch out that I'm not complaining about how uncomfortable my seat is, or my back, or it's cloudy today, why can't it be sunny? And I think there's an element of human nature where some people are hardwired to be more pessimistic, and others are seeing the beautiful clouds, even though it's not sunny out. So I do think that we, as individuals, have work to do to participate in a society and a workplace and be part of the solution, not part of the problem. And you're never going to be part of the solution if you're going to be negative. But it's deep-seated in human nature to look to complain about something, and then it spreads really fast. So if you've got negative people in the office, that's why they say in all these articles, don't surround yourself with people who are negative. If you have a friend that's negative, the Dear Abbeys and everything say you don't want that person as a friend. Surround yourself with positive people, because the negativity is really contagious, and you need to, I think, root it out. Because it'll like one bad apple will spoil the whole barrel. That's a negative person in the room. They're going to just create that whole atmosphere of distrust by one person, and that's really hard for leaders to do, is to deal with those people who are constantly negative.
Yeah, thanks, Sandy. And the question for Tammy regarding to what you mentioned, the trust takes a long time to build, and it's very, very fragile and easy to break. So I think organization the same. You can be a good salesperson until you lost one customer or lost one client. So the enthusiasm to be successful for the company, it has to be in a very high state. You have to do well all the time in order to earn trust and respect. So is that one of the reasons people feel tired? I mean, if not being forgiven for the mistake that they make? Yeah.
Well, I think that, I think that's true in some cases. I think there are organizations that are more forgiving and more flexible around understanding, like for example, the example you gave, of a salesperson, that they understand that there will be sales that fall through, and if they are a positive leader, they will help their sales team understand that sales fall through sometimes, even though it may mean some major losses. I would say that might be a rare sales leader who's that understanding, but it certainly helps when you have, a culture that allows people to make mistakes and learn from mistakes. That there's nothing more important than that. That really goes into a whole area of, what kind of organizational culture are you building? Are you really nurturing? And I wanted to mention something else also. There's been studies done that show that we tend to have more negative thoughts than positive thoughts. That this is just, for some reason, human nature, that we tend to just, that even run unconsciously or subconsciously through our minds, that we just run a lot of negative thoughts through our minds. It doesn't mean that we're necessarily negative by nature, but it kind of comes under the category of we're our own worst critics. I think part of it is not that we're being negative or that we're more problem solving, that we're trying to strive for better. I think it can fall under a number of categories. So I think where it tips the scales is something Sandy was just talking about, where when you have like one bad apple or one toxic person in an organization, where they'll find the negative in everything and then they'll bring everyone else down with them. It's amazing how that can happen at the same time, and they will destroy trust, right? There's a way in which you want to have kind of a mix of people who you trust, who will say things that might be negative, but in the spirit of trying to solve a problem, of trying to say, let's unpack this problem so that we can move in a more positive direction. That might sound negative for the moment, but it's not. It's really in the right direction. So, really you're trying to build people's energy up so that they are all moving together in a similar direction. And it's not even about agreeing with one another. Sometimes you can have disagreement and have good positive energy moving forward.
Yep.
Because people are being honest and trusting that people are being who they are with one another, and they can start from there. It's a good place to start from, even if they don't agree on everything, because they know that there's trust there.
And there's a starting place, Tammy, like you just said. And then I think that, how do you lead in an organization where you're trying to build trust? You know that everyone's starting at a place where they might be. It's a little bit unlevel and uneven. But if you can focus people on a common mission and purpose, and every organization that is a going concern is going to have a mission and a purpose, and maybe even have a culture and core values that support that mission and purpose. So I think for leaders who want to have an organization that's characterized by trust up and down the hierarchy, that they have to start from where everyone is in a little bit different position and focus them on a common mission and purpose with shared values and a positive culture that understands that we're all a little bit different skills and abilities. We're all working towards a common mission, and therefore we're going to tolerate sometimes when people might not exactly hit 100% on something. We're going to have help in place. We're going to train our people so they have the resources they need to get that mission. When they fall short of the mission, we're going to have mentoring so that we're going to help them to do better next time. We're going to reach out the hand and meet them where they are and pull them up to where we want them to be. So I think that's all some thoughts on how leaders can motivate people and to build trust in the entire organization by focusing on a common mission and goals and making sure people have the tools to achieve those goals. So when they do fall short, it's not because they weren't trained or mentored or something else.
With that being said, Sandy and Tammy, a lot of things organizations designed actually so yesterday. A management also is like in the textbook of 20 years ago, nothing changed. There's a lot of, structure. It's been designed for century of, the CEO going to the C-suite and, and then go all the way to the employees level. So those are the ones that create a lot of conflicts, a lot of unspoken things within the organization that destroy trust, and want it or not, it's still there, and it's going to be there for long until someone can come up with something that can fix the problem, right? Meanwhile, if we can have, if leaders are the one that leading the organization toward change and want to build that kind of culture of trust, and where can they take the baby steps so that they can change themselves and starting to steer that ship onto a destination they wanted to do? And I want to hear from Tammy. Can share with us first on that?
So I want to make sure I understand the question. So you're saying, how do you steer the ship in a more collaborative direction when you've had a very hierarchical or more traditional structure where it's been very top down. Is that what you're asking?
What I was saying is that there's a lot of things that also leaders we cannot change overnight, right? The structure of the organization, a lot of things that happen in there would not, change overnight. And those in there
Right.
will, be the blockade, the obstacle that letting people to be collaborating and building trust. So if I want to, help the people and I want to demonstrate the ability, the desire, I want to build trust for the team. What do I need to demonstrate now so that they know that I'm committing to that?
Well, great question. So I'm going to actually build on a number of things Sandy just spoke about, because I think she spoke to some things that are really critically important to building that trust and that kind of collaboration, and that is starting with some kind of common vision or mission, getting people to speak to that together. So, and then building in the supports around that. So if you have to have the resources and the supports around that to let people know that you will support them as they work towards that together. So I think there's got to be some consistent messages that cut across and go up and down the organization around what are we all here to do? What is our why? Why are we here? What are we all trying to achieve together? What's the big picture? And acknowledging people in substantive ways for how they are contributing to that. So I'm not saying, we make jokes in the US about giving trophies out to kids every time they show up to a soccer game or something like that. I'm not talking about acknowledging regular, oh, you showed up to work today. That's really good. I mean, really in a substantive way, letting people know that they've made a difference towards that greater vision. And it doesn't have to take a lot to do that. But when people know that they are being seen and heard, as you were mentioning earlier, and you can connect that to that sort of that pinnacle, that grander vision or mission of the organization, people are more likely to stop and listen when they've been heard and seen. So if you can put those into practice fairly quickly, those are messages. Those don't cost anything to do that. It starts to cost when you start building in resources and other supports around that. But I think there are ways that you can talk about those things and let people know that you are building those things in, that they've been heard. Sometimes it takes time to build some of those things in, but I think there are other ways to provide that. And to have expectations of people too. It's not just about providing for, it's also having expectations and lifting people up through those expectations and letting them know that you believe that they are up to the challenge or that they are up to learning things. People really get very, very engaged in their work when they feel like they're learning new things and when they're being held up to a higher standard. So those things are very important too. It's got to be a both way thing where they're being asked to contribute in ways maybe they haven't before as well. And I think that's a mistake that some leaders are making, where they're only where it's not a two-way equation.
It's a one-way direction, right?
Yeah. They're just giving orders or directives, and maybe they are sharing the mission and expecting people to buy in, but they have to really make sure that they are nurturing people's growth and giving them those opportunities, or people will leave. At least that's what we're seeing here in the U.S. for sure. But I've read lots of things that show that that's happening in other parts of the world too, in other cultures.
How about you, Sandy?
I think that there's another word that's really important when you're talking about trust, and that's the word power. And if you're looking to have an organization that's maybe more bureaucratic or more top-down hierarchical, and you want to have that organization become more agile and nimble, then you've got to, at the top level of that bureaucracy or hierarchy, you have to share power. And sharing power requires trust. So the more senior people that might be giving top-down instruction on here's your task, here's your sales targets, here's how you're going to meet your sales targets, then changing that dynamic and telling people here's what basic goals are that you have to meet, but we're gonna let you do it however you want, and we're gonna expect you to do it however you want, and bring new innovative ideas on how to get to those goals that we have set. We're not going to tell you how to do it. So typical government or hierarchical organizations tell people how to do it. Here's what you do. But sharing power means giving away some of your power and empowering them to do their jobs and do their jobs differently, and giving them the resources, because money is power, so resources are power. So sharing that power, and people, when they get more senior, they work their way up, they don't always want to share power because they've worked really hard to get where they are in an executive position. But I've found that when you share power and give it away, it all comes back to you, because the organization does better. Everybody looks better. Everybody's more proud. The mission gets accomplished. So I think that power dynamic is really important, and you can change it by sharing power and giving people the resources they need to do their job, and the space to do it in a more innovative, creative, collaborative manner.
Wow. The sharing power is a very powerful word, Sandy, and we only see it in the very, very good leader. Great leader can demonstrate that, but normal people, we just hold on to what we've been we think that we're entitled for, and it's really hard for us to release. And it makes like a 50 years old leader is no different than the kid of 5-6 years old holding the Barbie at hand, and no, it's mine, right? And then it's funny, we can tell the 5 years old baby kid, hey, give it to your friends, so that your roles can take turns and change and learn and play. But at 40-50 years old, holding the title, we forgot about the advice that we gave to our 5 years old baby at home. And so is there a way that we can help those leaders just to reflect and realize that they actually behave like the 5 years old baby? Is there a way, Tammy, that you think that you can share for us so that our audience can learn?
Yeah. Well, I love the way you just said that about people being 5-year-old babies. Well, I think some of the literature I've read about talks about things like where people really cross the line, where they're very controlling or they're micromanagers, that kind of literature. But I think there's, or being perfectionists. They want everything done their way or in a certain way. That's sort of the extreme. But I think there's ways to suggest that that their way is not the only way, and that in order to, if they're concerned about employee retention, if they're concerned about employee engagement, that there will be a way in which they need to start to see that if they don't allow people some space to contribute their own ideas or their own way of doing things, they will lose some of their most talented people. And they need to be able to take a look in the mirror and see where, and to make choices themselves where they can let go of certain things. Maybe they have to do it in a very measured and very intentional way. And maybe it's point by point. I'm talking like a coach now, where if I was coaching an executive around this, we would be having a very honest conversation about where can they allow themselves to let go a little bit, or even try it as an experiment to see what the outcome would be. and that this would be like a muscle that they have to learn to work and stretch in order to become the kind of leader that will have an organization that is growing and developing and keeping its top talent.
Wow.
And if that's important to them, then they need to be able to make some changes if they expect changes of other people.
Wow. Absolutely.
I think it's a really good approach, Tammy. You took that question from someplace I didn't even think of, from the executive level, who's already our age, maybe 50 years old or something. And it's going to be hard to change that person. But one thing I was thinking was, I'll share a little formula that people seem to like. It's a recipe called the 3 Ps of power. And maybe it's more for mid-level managers and entry-level people. But when I was an entry-level person, I was an ensign sailing on a ship that was going to Antarctica, of all things. And I was trying to get a guy who was junior to me even. So we're both junior people, but he's even more junior. I was trying to get him to do a job, and I was having a hard time. Even in the military, sometimes people don't take orders. So I asked my boss, I says, how can I get this this person to do what I want? And he said, Sandy, there's 3 kinds of power. It's personal power, professional power, and position power. And you're going to succeed if you lean on the first 2, your personal power and your professional power, and use position power only as a last resort. I just love that. I just tried to live that my entire career, having him told me that. So your personal power is how you interact with people, your emotional intelligence. Your professional power is what you know, how you do it, how you present yourself. And then you don't need your position power if you're going to be working really hard to motivate people to build trust and earn respect by your personal and professional powers. You can leave that position power on the shelf, and then you have a whole culture, if you have a lot of people with that same philosophy, where you're trying to use your personal and professional power to get the job done, and the position power has just become less important to people because you don't need it.
Wow. And that is so beautiful, because a few days ago, Vivian and I talked to Nicole Heyman, and then she shared this thing is that made me and Vivian talk the whole evening. It's like without a title, we take away everything, the title, position, the privilege, and what is that, who we are, to the people, it really matter, right? And then if we can live up like that, so it's not a position, doesn't matter anymore, because I can work with you for 10 years, 20 years by retirement, but then we have a friendship for life, a partner, a colleague relationship forever. I can transcend, it can carry to the next generations, and that truly matters. So I really appreciate Sandy and Tammy and Vivian to participate to this big topic of trust, because I think that is foundation to build everything good again. If it's already good, it can get better, and there's a lot of advices that so valuable in this conversation today, and I really appreciate that you share all of that together for us and the audience to reflect, to think, and to pick something out of this to apply to their works, their life, and if they can build a better, even a better team, a better department, a better organization that can create a lot of ripple effects around us, and just by building the trust. And thanks a lot for your participations and all your kind things today. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sandy. Wish you all the best.
I wish that we can have like 2 more hours to talk about this, but we don't. So, so I need to let you guys carry with the work that you are doing today, and I wish beautiful day to all of you. Okay.
Thank you so much.
So much, Sandy,
Thank you.
Tammy.
Appreciate it.
Bye.
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 Take care.